Welcome to Top 5, a show where we get drawn on a cell, we get animated 24 times a second, and then, depending on how the budget is at your studio, you may just get a giant hose sprayed on you. This is Top 5.
I'm animated 27 frames per second.
Actually, you know, a lot of times when we look at it, there's a lot of ways you can animate. You can animate at 24 frames a second, which is pretty typical for your major motion pictures. But for the Saturday morning cartoons, you're being animated on the 12s or less. So in some cases, you are being animated 6 frames a second.
That happens. And since I am animated by the cheap Korean animation studio that did the episodes of Transformers that you didn't like in 1986, sometimes I change color.
Well, and
that happens.
And in all of your close-ups, it's really creepy because they were so cheap, they could only draw your face once, and then they cut it out, the mouth, and you just have your lips in there going, hello, money.
They did not clutch cargo me. Thank you very much. I was not clutch cargoed. This is a lie.
This week, we are talking our top 5 cartoon characters. And my number 5, Matthew, actually had a change at the last minute because you said, or actually inadvertently, I said something about Challenge of the Super Friends, which I know was not the first season of the Super Friends. But
it's like the 4th.
But as a very young child, and so I was, this was under the age of 5. So this would be like 73, 74, probably first season of Super Friends. I remember going down on Saturday mornings and turning on the TV and waiting for the black and white TV to warm up. And I remember seeing Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman and Aquaman. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. And then there was this beauty. She was super smart. She was sassy. She had a stupid brother and a dog. And I was just like, she may have been my first cartoon crush. Wendy and Marvin, the original Wonder Twins from the Super Friends. Wendy, one of my favorite cartoon characters. Just that, she's a smart one, but she still gets in trouble, and she serves as the gateway for the young kids to get into the Super Friends.
She's drawn as 15, but has the voice of a 50-year-old woman.
Yes, who was that? June. Wasn't the same person that did the voice of the squirrel? Was it?
No,
June Foray.
No.
Was it June Foray?
It was not June Foray. I can't remember who did. I was actually looking this up today because I was trying to find out their last names. Marvin's last name was White, reputedly, according to the wiki. That was established in the Super Friends comic book and nothing.
Sherry Alberoni. Sherry Alberoni used to be one of the original Mouseketeers, voiced Wendy. Matthew, that is my number 5. That's my number 5, Matthew. Who do you have as your number 5 cartoon character?
My number 5 is likewise a huge crush of mine, but a much more recent crush, something that has really developed only in my 40s. Initially, when we met her, she was a probably ineffectual human resources manager. And obviously she was bad at this because she would use the information that she ran into and actually speak of it to other employees, which is always bad. And she had this dolphin hand puppet that she would use for HR mediations to try and make things clearer because it's a dolphin. But then we discovered that there's a lot more to Pam Poovey, the HR director of the spy agency ISIS from Archer, than it seems. For instance, she is apparently a brilliant fighter, a street racer, known to the other racers as, I believe that they called her the White, well, she thought it was White Shadow. It turns out they were actually calling her the White Pumpkin. She actually nearly beat several people to death just because she could. And in the latest season of Archer, Archer Dreamland, which is this weird story taking place in 1947 Los Angeles, like in a noir movie.
Yeah, it looks really good.
She's actually a cop in L.A., and she's basically playing the Russell Crowe character from L.A. Confidential.
Oh, cool.
Was that Russell Crowe?
I mean, he was a cop. He was a detective. He was one of the corrupt detectives.
Was he the big, angry, corrupt one who killed people? Yeah. Okay. She's basically playing that. And at one point, she's squaring off against 5 guys, and she's like, keep in mind, I'm going to get more tired, but also more berserker. The fact that she has just this, there's a joy to Pam. She grew up on a farm, a dairy farm, and she has this love of everything and everyone. She slept with nearly everyone in the agency, male and female. She actually accidentally slept with Archer's mom, which that's a thing. Spoilers, by the way, for later seasons of Archer. And there's actually a running gag in the Archer Vice season where she gets addicted to cocaine and has lost a lot of weight. And she says something to Archer about how she feels like he likes her better now that she's lost weight. And they actually take time in Archer, which is not a series necessarily known for this, to stop and tell Pam that she's okay, that they love her regardless of whether she's thin or heavy. And I'm just like, oh, you guys, that's so sweet, in the middle of a season about, selling cocaine to people illegally and drug addiction and terrible, terrible things. There's just something about her where you're just like, yeah, if Pam Poovey existed in real life, I would regret it, but I'd totally date her.
All right.
And that's why she is my number 5.
All right. We are down to our number 4s. Earlier in the program, Matthew, I mentioned that, movies would be at 24 frames a second, different frame rates, the cheaper down you go.
Right.
The first time I ever encountered this character in animated form, I was simply blown away because of how smooth the motion was. And this character could fly through the air and he could beat up robots and he could do all these wondrous, amazing things. Oh. And it was just beautiful, beautiful animation. Now, while later animated shows would be inspired by this show, if I'm narrowing this down to top 5 cartoon characters, I have to say that the Fleischer Supermans,
yes,
are brilliant. And even though I love Superman the Animated Series, even though I love Justice League Unlimited and so on, I love
Fleischer Supermans.
The Fleischer Supermans. And they did that by rotoscoping. They would actually have Max Fleischer's brother would actually pose and jump and do all of these things, and they would film him in the cape and everything. And then they would go and they would trace over the film that they drew and create. First, they introduced rotoscoping. Second, they really understood the human motion from that. And the Superman Fleischer cartoons, while extremely racist in many places, which is unfortunate, product of its time, it is still beautiful. And Fleischer Superman is definitely my number 4 in my top 5 cartoon characters.
I remember those being available on VHS in high school and just trying to buy them all and being irritated that some of them were on every set.
Well,
some of them you'd be like, you're jumping around going, I can't find the one. I can't find the robots.
Yeah. And here's the robots one is pretty easy to find. It's like the ones where he's beating up the Japanese, and it's pretty racist when he gets into those. Those are a little bit harder to find. But the thing is, there's a weird thing about copyright that a lot of things in the 1930s kind of fell through this copyright gap. And there's actually some very interesting Mickey Mouse strips that have fallen into public domain because of copyright and non-renewal of copyright. The Fleischer Superman stuff at one point was out of copyright and in the public domain. I'm guessing it's still in the public domain, which means that anybody can market and sell these things. So you can go to a truck stop and you can find VHS or DVD versions of Superman, the Fleischer animated series. You can even go on YouTube and it's all there, and it's totally legal because it's in the public domain. And if you get a chance, go and track them down. Superman versus the Metal Monsters, I believe is what it's called, is beautiful. It's fantastic. You will look at it and marvel how almost 100 years ago, 90 years ago, that they were doing animation in this high quality style. And then you look at stuff today and you're like, okay, Gumball.
Be nice to Gumball. Gumball is amazing. In a lot of ways. Gumball is the one that's all mixed media, right?
Yes.
Gumball, it annoys me, but you have to look at that and go, man, they're putting a lot of effort into weird stuff that I wouldn't put effort into. Now, speaking of high quality animation.
Yeah.
My number 4 didn't have it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But what it did have were, I think, 3 things going for it. 1, brilliant design work. just amazing design work by a legendary artist named Alex Toth.
Mm-hmm.
It had an amazing cast, a voice cast, and solid music. The audio was just amazing. And it had one of the best, I don't know if you can even call it a catchphrase, because it's not so much a catchphrase when it's just the hero flying at you, screaming his name. Space Ghost! Da, 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 da. 1966. It's a Hanna-Barbera joint. Don't hold that against it.
No, it's really good.
Hanna-Barbera in 66 it's not Hanna-Barbera from 57, but it's not Hanna-Barbera from 75. And I think that it's that middle ground, literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
Where Space Ghost is this mysterious hero who flies around with these two teenage kids and a monkey. He's got this killer spaceship called the Phantom Cruiser. He's got one of the best, the deepest voice ever. Jace, get away from there before it explodes.
Mm-hmm.
My Gary Owens is terrible. The late Gary Owens, however, is amazing. I'm not saying better than Frank Welker, but I'm saying that in this case, he gave Frank a run for his money. An amazing design. Some of the plots felt maybe like we were repeating themselves, but even then there was a cleverness and there was kind of an ingenuity to Space Ghost that you didn't always see in the 60s adventure cartoons. Mm-hmm. And if you look at things that came after, if you look at like
the Spider-Man animated series.
Right,
Spider-Man
you look at the mighty Mightor even. Yeah. Mightor and Birdman, both, an attempt to catch that Space Ghost lightning in a different bottle. Not as much fun. But, what are you going to do?
No,
and then you
seriously.
get, Frankenstein Jr. and the Impossibles.
Yeah, Space Ghost falls in between the awesome Johnny Quest animated style and as you said, the Harvey Birdman stuff.
I don't even mind the Harvey Birdman stuff. I enjoy the fact that they put Space Ghost in and said, now he's a talk show host, okay? And everybody just went, yeah, all right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was pretty cool. And I like him better as a serious superhero in space, but I don't like him too serious. The 2006 Space Ghost limited series was all like, death, Batman, death and Batman. Oh, he's Batman, death in space. But yeah, one of the greatest moments in my life came in Batman, the Brave and the Bold, where Batman's flying along on his Batwing, and all of a sudden, Space Ghost comes up, and they're flying together, and it's Batman and Space Ghost, and Space Ghost is like, hello, Batman, and Batman's like, hello, I'm Oswald from the Drew Carey Show. And Space Ghost goes, yes, I know. And then they have this, it was one of those just 4-minute adventures before the opening credits. And I'm still like, ooh, goosebumps.
Yeah. Really cool.
Yeah. My number 4, Space Ghost, one of the best of the 60s Hanna-Barbera action tunes.
Save for Wendy and Marvin. I think people are going to start recognizing a trend here in mine. Because my number 3 also comes from Fleischer Studios. And it's black and white, and it's something that I cherished as a kid. Because you knew that it was time for Popeye to begin when you heard and you would see this little ship door open up and it would say, Fleischer Studios presents, and the things would close and make a noise. And then it would open back up and it would say Popeye the Sailor Man, and then it would close back up and then it would open up and tell you the title of that piece.
Alibaba and the 40 Thieves.
Oh my goodness. Alibaba and the 40 Thieves. Again, if you really look at the Fleischer Studios and the groundbreaking things that they were doing at the time, Alibaba and the 40 Thieves version is fantastic because they were creating these sets that were actually on a turntable. So they could animate the characters walking, and then the turntable would turn behind as like a Lazy Susan almost. And so they could have the characters continually walk and the background would just cycle through. And it was super fascinating. They also got really cool parallax. So even before Disney started doing his multiplane camera, you could get some parallax effects going on in that 40 Thieves movie. But Popeye the Sailor Man, the black and white stuff was, and again, depending on where you find it, the stuff you and I grew up watching in the reruns, Matthew, in the 70s on 41 or whatever channel it was, those were highly edited. But you watch the Popeye the Sailor Man unedited, and you get some salty chatter from Popeye. You get some stuff sometimes where Betty Boop shows up. In fact, Popeye first appeared in a Betty Boop cartoon where Betty Boop's running around topless.
That one's nuts.
Yeah, and so
I
Popeye
don't
the Sailor
understand
Man.
that one. It
This is
frightens
again before the '80s revival, before the '90s revival, before the more modern. I'm talking about classic black and
before
white
he
Popeye.
had nephews, before he had
Yes, the Jeep.
children.
Well, I think the Jeep showed up in the black and white stuff, but
Yes,
definitely
the Jeep
before
and the
he
Sea
had
Hag and
before he had nephews, before the color stuff came around. And I think the 40 Thieves was one of the first color Popeye movies. But before the cleaned up, pretty looking Popeye, the Fleischer Popeye stuff is fantastic. And Popeye and Olive Oyl and Brutus and the Sea Hag and the Jeep and all that stuff, the Goon, Alice the Goon, definitely Popeye and Friends fall into my favorite cartoon characters category and deserve a strong placing at number 3.
yeah, those are pretty amazing. They actually at certain points, and I can't remember which one it is, they had stuff in front of the animation cell.
Yeah, that's that
To where-
multiplane. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, where Popeye was actually passing behind things in the foreground, and I'm just like, whoa.
Yeah, it's really cool. At one point,
how's that even go?
I don't know how I got my hands on it, but somewhere in the 3rd or 4th grade, I got my hands on like 2 or 3 reels of black and white 8mm Popeye cartoons.
Oh, wow.
And we had an 8mm projector, but that thing was noisy. And even though my mom and dad were allowed me to run it, I had to be super careful because, you know, if the film got caught, the stuff would melt and heat up and catch fire very easily.
Catch fire and burn down the house.
And I thought it was so cool that I could build my own like kinetoscope. At least I thought I could. I couldn't because I didn't understand how it truly worked. But I built this box and I took an eyepiece off my telescope and I had it focused down onto an individual frame of the film. And I had a light bulb underneath and I could look through it. And I had a crank on the side where I would turn the reel. And of course, because it didn't have a catch and I didn't have a shutter, which I didn't know about the shutter, it's just a blurry mess. But I was really fascinated about animation at that early age, thanks to those black and white Popeye reels that I had. And I'm sure they're long gone by now. But
yeah, always a film nerd.
Popeye the Sailor Man. Yep.
And then, of course, the Fleischer brothers would animate. They would punctuate each thing with those doors closing.
Yeah. Cocoon. Yeah, it was great. I loved it. What do you have for your number 3?
My number three. Are we at number 3?
Holy moly, are at number 3 already.
My number 3 is actually from a relatively modern show that I did not find out about until after it had already been canceled. Apparently,
Animaniacs?
No. Apparently, before the WB went under, the WB put some money into a really well done animated sitcom called Mission Hill. And Mission Hill is the story of this slacker jerk who is forced to take in his teenage genius brother because their parents are retiring and moving away.
Yeah.
And basically, it's this kid who's in his 20s. He's kind of a proto-hipster because this was like 2001. And he lives in a very trendy portion of the city. And he's trying to be one of the cool guys. And of course, he has to be kind of a stand-in parent for his brother, who is absolutely not. But what's fascinating to me is the main character, Andy, is kind of a quintessential screw-up. That, slacker jerk, almost a caricature of the slacker jerk. But his best friend is a man named Jim. My number 3, Jim Kubak from 2001's Mission Hill, for 2 reasons. One, Jim is voiced by Brian Posehn, so he's always good for the, hey, how's it going? And throughout the, first several episodes, you get this thought that Jim's even more screwed up than Andy. Jim's even less driven. But then it starts to come clear when Andy loses his job that Jim goes to work every day. And Jim is an advertising executive at a high-profile firm. And they go in and he's like, yeah, I do computer stuff. And he's like, oh, yeah, just fool the old guys. He's like, well, yeah, high-res Photoshop batch compositing blows my mind. Whoa, let's have Jim do it. And we find out that Jim is not just an advertising executive, but a really good one and a trusted voice at this agency. He's like their young go-to guy. So at one point, somebody's like, hey, what do you think about this? I don't know. Does anybody want brown cookies anymore? And based on this, they create space cookies that are green and purple to try and get kids to buy it. And it's brilliant to see this character he seems to be just a drinker, a slacker, a jerk, but he's actually really effective, really good at his job. And at one point they're like, oh, wait, what's this your insurance card? Oh, yeah. Oh, we got the plus now. He's apparently this well-paid, well-respected person who is just brilliant at his job. And I love the idea that he seems to be this loser D-bag, but it turns out he's actually the most together person in the whole show.
Yeah, subverting.
And that includes even the adults. I mean, the adults are lost, and Jim is still just like, hey, which makes you think that maybe Jim owns the apartment and he lets his idiot friends stay there because he likes them.
Yeah, maybe.
That's kind of neat.
Yeah. My number 2 should come as no surprise. Because
wait, let me see. What else did the Fleischer Brothers animate?
Well, so it's not something that they animated, but Batman the Animated Series was totally based on the Fleischer style from that time period. And so when I say Batman from the animated series, that is a favorite cartoon character of mine because of the way that they did throwbacks to the way the Superman Fleischer was done and the other things of that time period. It really has a distinct look. And I think if you look at Batman the Animated Series, since it's basically contained, and I say contained, I mean, you could look at it contained just in the animated series, or you could look at it from Batman the Animated Series, Superman, the Justice League, Justice League United, the Batman Beyond. You could encompass all of that.
Don't forget the movies all of those.
Yeah, all those animated movies. I mean, you could encompass that and you would have the only Batman you would ever need to know. You wouldn't have to read the comics. You wouldn't have to watch the movies or anything. If you really wanted to know what Batman was all about at its heart and was really concise and condensed and purified, filtered, whatever you want to call it, fermented. The Batman the Animated Series character is
not fermented.
He's not fermented. The Batman the Animated Series is distilled essence of what Batman is.
There you go.
And so Batman the Animated Series, just that character. I mean, you can't point to Batman in these new animated movies, and you can't point to Batman Beyond or not Batman Beyond, but Batman Strikes or any of that stuff. I'm talking about that Batman the Animated Series character.
Beware the Batman.
Yes, not that one. But that is the good stuff. And so my number 2, oh my goodness, people, Superman at number 4, Batman at number 2.
It's going to be number 1.
What is going to be number 1 in my top 5 cartoon characters? We will find out in a moment, right after Matthew tells us his number 2.
My number 2 comes from the days of my youth, when I was told what it means to be a man. And now I've reached that age that I have a child and I like to show her things that I liked when I was a kid. But I don't force her to love them or else. And I think that's important. She's allowed to hate things that I loved. But one thing she loves that I loved is extremely limited animation. Came out of Britain. I first saw it as interstitial stuff on Nickelodeon in 1982, 83, 84. And you'd just see it, and then all of a sudden you'd hear the dun 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 dun, and Danger Mouse would be on your screen in little 5 and 10 minute increments of Danger Mouse. Danger Mouse is a superhero with an eye patch and a really cowardly companion and a penchant for puns. The villain is Cyrus Greenback, which I think always cracks me up for some reason. You there?
Oh, yeah, I'm listening.
Oh, okay, I heard a pop like my audio was gone.
Oh, no, that's just your back.
Oh, well, that's cool. That's probably my son.
No, it won't be tomorrow.
Shut up. But Danger Mouse is extremely limited animation, especially in the early versions. But the joy of the voice actors and the writing and the fun, the silly references and the puns and the stuff really make it amazing. And there's a point where someone is running around. He's like, I shall dispatch thee. And Danger Mouse says, you leave my patch alone. Get it? He's an ancient martial artist, and his martial artist is called Kung Magi, which I believe is the name for a kitty cat. But along with Penfold, who is a hamster who wears spectacles and loves mushroom pizza, he saves the world from evil repeatedly. At one point, they meet an alien who's Scottish for some reason. Nobody knows why. But as we go through, they start actually getting so popular that they have to add new animation, because the 5-minute bits with the recycled animation and the same things over and over, you see that, and even the creators are like, man, we need to draw some new stuff. Danger Mouse has the coolest car, I think, in the 80s cartoon history.
Roller skate?
No, it's actually a little yellow race car with wings that come up the Mark V. You're thinking of Tom and Jerry.
There we go.
Yeah, that's from Yankee Doodle Mouse. That is an also ran. Jerry almost made my list until I had to bump him. But my number 2, Danger Mouse. Danger Mouse. Apparently there's a 2015, 2016 revamp that I haven't seen.
Yeah, they did that on what? Oh, not on Boomerang.
No, it was on BBC's channel.
Oh, was it? I thought it was on the same channel that ran Samurai Jack.
That's Cartoon Network.
Yeah, that's where I thought they had the new stuff.
I didn't know they had it.
One of our listeners will write in and tell us exactly where to find it.
It's on BBC Wales.
Yeah. It is time for our number ones, and people might be saying, Steven, no Porky Pig, no Woody Woodpecker, no Chilly Willy the Penguin, no Daffy Duck, no Bugs Bunny. Steven? What are you doing, man? Hey, this is my list. If those characters are on your list, that's great. I don't have a problem with that.
If Rodrigo or Ashley were here, they might have those people on their list.
They probably have like Thundar.
Yeah.
They probably have, what's his name from the Space Rangers, the Space Cowboy show.
Brave Star, yeah.
Brave Star
Rodrigo would have Brave Star. He'd have Samurai Jack.
And that's cool. I mean, there's nothing wrong with any of those.
I think Rodrigo would have the Cowboys of Moo Mesa.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. But my number one cartoon character is one that when you watch the movie that this character is in, you're like, wow, this is an animated character that's been around since the 1930s, and I've never heard of him, and he's interacted with all these other cartoon characters, and now he's having an adventure where someone's trying to wipe them out. When Roger Rabbit hit the screen, I was totally blown away. I mean, so much so that when the movie came out on VHS, I ruined the tape in the first 6 months because I watched it so much. The adventures of this rabbit, this cartoon rabbit who's living in a human world where humans and cartoon characters live together, is so cool because it is, a murder plot that this rabbit is too stupid to really figure out, or he's not really stupid, but his goal in life is to just make people happy. And he's married to the most gorgeous cartoon character on the planet. And he's got a new detective friend who's going to help him. And the two of them have such funny adventures together that when they finally defeat Dr. Doom, or whatever his name is, Mayor Von Doom.
Judge Doom.
Judge Doom. It's such a good piece. And the fact that in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, that they are able to bring in, this is the only time this will ever happen in history, where the studios were able to sit down and say, oh, you want to put Coco the Clown in? Sure, here's Coco the Clown. Feel free to use him. Oh, you want Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny to be on the screen at the same time interacting? Yes, let us shake hands and let's make this bit of awesome happen. But beyond that, you have Roger Rabbit, who is just a likable fellow. And it's such a good movie that Roger Rabbit has to be my favorite cartoon character of all time.
Nice.
Who do you have for your number one, Matthew?
My number one is actually very recent, and it's another one that I started watching partly because of my daughter. But I came in at a weird point. I didn't, watch the show from the beginning, and cartoons these days actually have through lines and narrative arcs and stories that mean something. It's not like every Super Friends episode ended with everybody back at square one.
And laughing.
Yeah, like the Truman Show. We're all at position one for our places in the morning. The show immediately started making changes and making hints and talking about things that clearly are extremely important that we aren't aware of because our perspective is that of a 13-year-old boy. And 13-year-old boys aren't always aware of what are going on with their parents, even when their parents are extra dimensional rock people with, illusionary bodies. But there comes a point at the end of season 1 of Steven Universe where an evil alien comes to Earth and attacks Garnet, the most powerful of the crystal gems, the leader, the one that everybody kind of leans on, the one character who's been really kind of implacable throughout that whole first season, immediately shatters her body and she explodes. That's pretty terrifying. And then they make the revelation that Garnet, my number 1, is not merely the leader of the crystal gems. She's not a crystal gem, Stephen. She's 2 crystal gems.
2 crystal gems
merged into one body, and for the last 6,000 years has basically been making out with herself every single second of every single day, which is kind of cool. And it really sets up a lot of the mythology of the show almost to where you don't recognize it, you don't realize it. And then when you come around and you realize they've been showing us this since square one.
Mm-hmm.
Episode 1, day 1, there are hints as to what's going on with Garnet. But Garnet is fascinating because, first of all, I love the fact that she is, by all accounts, a traditional superhero character. She has a costume, a mask, a code name. She fights evil, and she's really, really funny. And she has this cool British accent. So you got me right there.
Who does the voice of that? Is that
Estelle is her name.
Okay. All right.
She's a singer.
Yeah.
But Estelle's voice is fascinating because Garnet, she's British. It happens. It just sort of happens. You don't know why.
Mm-hmm.
But throughout the series, we see these moments where everybody gets their hero bits, but Garnet is like a step above. Yeah. Garnet is amazing.
She's like badass.
Yeah.
Don't want to take your crap.
The first time Garnet sings is a show-stopping moment, and they literally give over almost half an episode to letting Estelle sing Garnet's song, and it's just beautiful.
You can find that on YouTube. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Garnet episodes, if you see Garnet, sit down, you're in for something. And as we find out, she is a rounded character. She is not the secret, implacable person that no one knows anything about. She has doubts. She has weaknesses. She has all of these things about her that you're like, oh my God, how could I not have seen that from the beginning? But then you realize she's still a kick-butt superhero. Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And she's also the best mom because, Steven has a lot of honorary parents and a father who's not always there because, I don't know, something
He's a
about
rock star traveling
car
around,
wash.
washing cars.
Yeah, sure. Like you do.
Yeah.
But my number 1, Garnet, is, I think, one of the most impressive recent characters. You know what I like most about her?
What's that? The glasses?
She's purple.
Yeah.
But the character, everything about the character is coded as African American.
Yep.
And everything about this character, if you look at her and you're thinking, okay, this is cool. She's the leader. She's the fastest, the strongest. She's the best. And I'm like, yeah. And then I think about it, and how weird is it that all of this is taking place, and I'm reading this as this is an African-American woman, even though the whole point of the story is that these are alien creatures from another world. You still go through, and your brain goes, yep, that's exactly what this is. And that I love. I love the fact that is just part of the narrative. It's not something that's shoved into anybody's noses. It's not something that becomes, you don't have to think about it. You just accept it. It is there, and the stories are amazing. And I really love that.
Yep. All right. I think we're going to have to do an episode in the future that's just like our top 5 cartoon episodes.
There you go.
Where it's just specifically an episode. So someone needs to suggest that so we can get to it. If you do have a suggestion,
we'll do that separately of our top 5 Steven Universe episodes, or else it'll be a monotonous show for me, I think.
No, that'd be fine. You just have to talk about those 5 episodes. That's totally fine. I could think of, 3 of my top 5 right now could be Batman the Animated Series episodes, but I know I could fish in.
Heart of Ice.
Heart of Ice is really good. That would probably be my number 4.
Yeah, or Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker, also a good one.
I don't know about that. I would definitely like my number 2 would be the Batman Beyond episode where he sits down. No, it's the Justice League Unlimited, where it's like the future episode or whatever, where Batman goes and sits down with one of the Was she the ace of spades? I forget which one she was. The little
I think
girl,
she may have been the 10.
The 10, where she has the telekinetic powers and she's going to destroy the entire world. But Batman just sits down with her and he's like, hey, I'll hold your hand until the end if you want. And she's like, okay. And then that's the end. It's just really, really, really good. It's the most touching Batman moment you will see in any form, I think. So we'll have to do that. Now people know what my number 2 is in a future episode. But for now, listeners, you need to head over to majorspoilers.com and you need to, in the comments section, you need to share your top 5 cartoon characters and tell us why. You don't have to tell episodes. Just tell me why, Bugs Bunny is your favorite cartoon character. And that's great. I mean, I was really debating Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, but then, there's a lot of really crappy Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck stuff. I'm a big 1940s, Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck fan. Not so much the 1970s Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck fan.
Come on.
Or even 1980s and 90s Space Jam, Bugs Bunny kind of stuff. Not my jam. But if it is yours, that's great. And you can share it with us over at Major Spoilers. Why? Because everybody loves a list. Take care, everyone.
This podcast is copyright 2017 by Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC.